Welcome, everyone. We're so glad to have you here today for our year-end celebration service. We're going to do something a little different. Instead of listening to me talk the whole time, we're going to bring some of our Bethany family members in, and I want you to hear their stories. One of the great advantages I have as a pastor here at Bethany Church is to listen to people's stories. And throughout the year, I hear all the time about how Bethany members donate their time, their talent, and their treasures. We pull them together, and because of that, their stories start to change other people's stories. And I want you to hear those stories live today. Now, today I want to start with my friend Laura. Welcome, Laura.
Hi.
Laura was going to be with us live, but God has called her for some reason to camp in the snow this weekend. So I thank you very much, Laura, for letting me interview you here inside in the warmth and not making me go out to the snow. So thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
So Laura, tell me a little bit about what brought you here to Bethany Church in the first place as part of your spiritual development.
I moved to Portsmouth about 5 years ago, and then I drove past the big white steeple.
So the architecture
I decided
drew
to check
you.
it out.
Yeah. So that first time you walked in the door, tell me about your impressions when you came here. What was the event? What was the occasion? And tell me about your impressions.
Well, it was Christmas, and so I came to your Christmas service, and the place was massive. And I think that I remember somebody explaining that it can be overwhelming, and it was. But it was also super pretty because you do that whole light the candle and pass it around
candlelight
thing.
and everything.
Yeah, and so there was something really peaceful about that that made me. I look forward to that every year now at Christmas.
Yeah. So you started coming back on Sundays because of that Christmas Eve service.
Correct.
You started coming back on Sundays. And I think you told me at some point you decided to start going to the From the Heart event as well.
Correct.
Yeah.
So I would say for the past 3 years, I've been going to 4 to From the Heart, and that was kind of scary for me because I was going alone. So I remember the past 3 years feeling like I was all by myself in a sea of people, and I felt pretty lonely. But it was changing the way that I looked at my walk with God. So
you were coming here and you were kind of getting lost in the abundance of people, enjoying the services, but still starting to feel maybe not connected to other people, right?
Yeah. With the exception of there was a woman that I went to work, I work with, and one day I was sitting out during a service and I opened my eyes and she was sitting next to me.
Wow. So
we ended up going to church together for a little while, but she ended up moving away, and then it left me back in the sea of people again.
So you were feeling a little disconnected, and then at some point along the way, something happened, and you decided, maybe I need to take this up to another level. Tell me about that.
Okay. So it's an interesting story. I went to go donate blood I think it was this past summer. Yeah, so sometime around August. And when I was donating blood and I got finished and I was eating my snacks with these women, and they went to some local churches, and we got talking about God and the things that we enjoy. And I happened to mention that I liked working with teens, and they were really encouraging me that was something that I should pursue. And then on a whim, I decided to come to your Saturday service that evening. And about 30 seconds into walking through the doors, I think I'm going to call them a group of women. Descended upon me. And I got a bunch of hugs from these women, and I felt really excited because I was suddenly a part of something. And we were all sharing what we liked to do, and I told them about the hiking in the winter. And then I mentioned that I liked working with the youth. And then before I knew it, I was sitting up in the front row with you.
Yeah, that was a great event. Sometimes on that Saturday evening, things are a little smaller. And what I love about your story, Laura, is that you kind of felt lost, but you took a step. You said, I need to get connected. Because, here on staff, we're always saying, come on, do something. But it takes that action. And you came on a Saturday night, and there were all these women it was like they were planning to come talk to you. And through that conversation, we got to meet. And I was, on one hand, I was a little embarrassed because you've been coming here for 5 years, and I didn't even know you were here. So that was tough for me. I had to swallow my pride and realize I got to do a better job here. But on the other hand, I was so delighted to hear your story and hear about your interest of getting engaged. So we kind of got you engaged with student ministries, and I got you connected with Kristen, and we got you to show up to a couple. So tell me about how those first couple times as you went and started to get involved with our student ministries. Tell me how that experience went.
Really well. It's so interesting because I think like 6 women from your congregation were emailing me on the sidelines during the first couple weeks, cheering me on or checking in to see how I was doing. And Kristen started to mentor me, and I started to get to know the women leaders and the teenagers in the youth group. And shortly after, I got invited to the youth retreat. I mean, I think I had only been there for like 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah.
And
Kristen, by the way, is our intern director for our student ministry. She's an amazing person, filled with energy and wisdom.
Yeah.
And so I just knew it was going to be a good match to connect you with Kristen. So they got you involved right away, and a lot of encouragement. Mm-hmm. And you went to the student ministry retreat. Tell me about that. How much fun was that?
That was tons of fun. I got to take the opportunity to have pies thrown in my face.
Yeah, pies. That's one of the ways we induce people to serve around here. We put you and let people throw pies at you. So it's part of our recruitment strategy. Pretty good, huh?
The teenagers seem to enjoy throwing the pie in my face.
Well, you're a good sport for taking all that, yes. So tell me a little bit, now that you've been in this for a while, you're telling me it kind of changed your spiritual journey, this growing closer to Christ. By serving others, you're actually growing closer to Christ as a disciple yourself. Tell me a little bit how that's working.
So there's 2 things that I really struggled with over the past 5 years. Is there's this like element of feeling really lonely, and like it was challenging for me to really feel God's presence in that loneliness. And it was also really challenging, like, with the negative thoughts that every human being feels. Only I, over the past 5 years, could get pummeled with them, especially if I was feeling alone. And what's interesting is that teenagers feel that every day. So I'm able to connect with them and really understand what they might be going through. So I see God using my struggles to help other people. And what's also really cool is I see God like bringing people for me to help and bringing people to help me. So I'm becoming a better woman and closer to God. So I wake up in the morning and the very first thing I think about now is my relationship with God, which is huge for me. I mean, I've always believed in him and had my faith was really strong, but it's so much deeper now than I could have possibly imagined. And what also is really interesting is that one of the youth leaders hooked me up with a Christian counselor who specializes in the things that I struggle with. And she's been able to meet with me for like 2.5 hours, which is an hour and a half longer than the normal session. And the first session was completely free, and she worked up a payment plan that works for me, and she prays with me, and she encourages me and checks in with me via text. And I'm seeing the way that I look at life completely different than I ever have before.
You know what I find amazing is how God customized this role for you. I mean, because in your professional career, you're a corporate trainer. You talk to people, you train them. And so now God has used that gift and that skill now working with these students. And at the same time, he's taking the kind of the weaknesses, the challenges, right? And he's using those challenges that now you can relate. So God uses this whole total package now to bring you into the lives of these teenagers in a way that is remarkable and amazing. So, and then you told me also that by serving others, these other women have come into your life, and you actually now have mentors working with you. And tell me a little bit about the mentors in your life that you've developed now, that not only you're mentoring students, but other people in your ministry team are now mentoring you.
One of them is my neighbor.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, and so now we go for runs together, and she guides me spiritually, and I think that we're able to like be there for each other, which is lovely. And I don't know, I'm like, Kristen will send me the scriptures that I need at the exact right moment, and it's amazing because she has no idea what's going on in my life, but God does. And now he's using all these really strong women to help me.
Yeah.
And then all of these things that they're teaching me, I get to apply to when I talk with the students and the youth group.
Yeah.
And even more cool is that one of the number one things that I hear from a teenager, and I know from remembering completely what it's like to be a teenager who was really shy and scared. I remember all those negative thoughts that go through your brain. And now I have all these resources helping me understand how to reframe those thoughts, which I can then share with all of these girls, which is pretty awesome.
So before we began, you told me something special. You're going to come back this year to the Christmas Eve service, which by the time we see this, it would actually be the week after. But you were telling me you're looking forward to this Christmas Eve service for a little different reason this year. Tell me what it is.
I'm not going alone.
Yeah.
So I don't have to, I've always looked forward to the Christmas Eve service, but I also struggle when I get there. I cry through Christmas Eve service, but I'm not going to cry this year. If I do cry this year, it's going to be because I'm happy, because I'm surrounded by people that, like friends and people that I know and
That's awesome.
are growing to love.
That's great. Well, I thank you for sharing your story. You know, I'm just so touched that through so many people and so many different programs and so many efforts, God in this magisterial way has woven all these things together to change your story. And now you're investing your story in other stories, these students, and you're helping to change and mold their stories. It's the way God works. Well, thank you so much, Laura, for taking the time to share your story with us. I hope you enjoy your time in the snow and come back nice and thawed and warm and ready to engage with all of us. Thank you so much for sharing and being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
She is delightful, let me tell you. Wonderful young woman. You know, as a pastor, it's such a privilege to get to know these people and their stories. And it's clear to me as we go through the year that things are happening that maybe you don't know about. And so we thought it might be nice to pull together a service at the end of the year to celebrate all the things that God is doing among us. And while we can't get to everyone's story, we wanted to give a sampling here and there of what God is doing to encourage us that God is at work. And so we want to tell a few of those stories. So we heard from Laura, and now I want to invite my friends Kyle and Dawn to share their story with us here. So welcome, Kyle and Dawn. Glad to have you.
Yoshi.
Thank you.
They were so eager to come up here and share, weren't you? And their children are here to cheer them on. So there you go. They're biggest fans. So Kyle and Dawn, tell us a little bit about what first brought you to Bethany Church now several years ago. Tell us what drew you here. What kind of was the driving force that made you look us up?
So I guess take this. For 15 years, we've been coming to Bethany now, and we're married in 2003. Knew that we.
He got that right.
I had to thank you.
That's good.
At least I get a point. So looking at how we wanted to have our marriage, our family be God-centered, we started looking for churches really around 15 years ago, so that's
Yeah.
2005, really. And it was when our daughter was about to be born. So we visited a number of churches, or I visited a number of churches to see which one would really be the best for raising a family and staying the long term. So a lot of the different churches were very different. We grew up both in a very traditional church, and there are churches, and going to see other churches in the area that were a lot different than what we really grew up with. So a friend of mine from Merrimack, New Hampshire, knew that we were looking and said, well, have you looked at Bethany in Greenland? And said, no, and really hadn't heard of it. So my job being the one to go out and do the interviews and talk to pastors and all that fun stuff, came into the lower level through the children's ministry and just looked at the boat. And
It kind of overwhelmed when you
awestruck.
first walked in. It was like all of a sudden the boat, the people, all the
Yes.
energy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you've never been downstairs, you need to experience that. It's just tons of energy going on down there, so it's quite an impressive thing when you walk in.
There are people come here for years and don't venture
Yeah.
down 2 flights of stairs to the church, to the children's ministry, and it's amazing. So
Yeah.
I experienced that, and then wanted Dawn to see it, and so we actually came through the main level and just looked up, and we were turned to see the lights coming down and see the sun. It's just like God saying, "This is
it.
home. This is the place."
it.
And so it was pretty awesome.
Yeah. So, Don, talk to me a little bit about, in this culture of trying to raise children, and you guys came from different religious backgrounds, and when you had a child that you said, I need to get the faith part of our family together, and you and Kyle talked. So tell me a little bit about what went into that conviction. Why did you feel like it was so important to get your children in a church environment?
Well, bringing a child into this world, in the trying times that we have, it was scary. And, I was blessed to meet him. God brought him into my life at just the right time, and then we were blessed with beautiful children. And we wanted to protect them and guide them the best way that we could, and we needed help with that. So that was our drive, to find a church. And yes, we had been to church when we were younger, like Kyle said, but it was the feeling of the church that was very important to me when I walked in. Like he said, when we walked into the children's ministry area, I just felt a sense of engagement, comfort, and warmth. Being in here and being downstairs and just seeing, the hustling and bustling of the children and all of the volunteers and everyone having their part. We just knew that we needed that help. And
So now you've brought through 3 children now through our kids ministry. Tell me a little bit specifically, how did what they were learning, how did that help you as parents parent better? In other words, how did you feel like they were resourcing you and reinforcing you and helping you raise your children through what they're doing down there? Give me some specifics.
Through the teachings that we hear about, I haven't witnessed the classes and what they're teaching, but through what our kids are sharing with us, they're having a lot of fun. They enjoy reading the Bible. They read
So
the
you
Bible at home.
debrief with them after the morning and say, what did you learn? You had those
Absolutely.
conversations. So those follow-up conversations become important then.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of comedy as far as some of the things that they say, and it's not the strict Sunday school that we grew up with. They're having fun.
Yeah.
Like I should probably go down there and be a goofball with them, but it's taught us to really sit down and have the conversations with them, the God-centered, because as Don said, it's a scary world. It really is. And it's, I think, probably scarier being a Christian in this world, because there are a lot of people coming after you from a lot of darkness, and you know, the dark one is coming at you from a lot of different angles. So it's tough. It's not an easy thing. So having other parents, having the people that we've met when we first started coming here, you know, we still have, you know, good relationships with them, and you know, that people just become your family. And listening to the kids pray, especially our youngest, he just absolutely blows me away with the things that how he prays. I mean, he could be a pastor.
Yeah.
You know, with the graying hair of some of the pastors here and the graying beards, he may be taking a place pretty soon. So it's just been...
It's encouraging as parents to see your children develop. Don, you wanted to...
absolutely.
I was just going to say that a lot of what they're learning, and I'm an educator, so this is important to me, but a lot of what they're learning is relevant to their lives. So there are different life stages. And hearing Laura speak, we have a teenager now, and I can really relate to what she was saying up there about what teens go through. And knowing that my oldest daughter will have that support moving forward, and will have those people that she's made those relationships with along the way that she can go and talk to if she doesn't feel like she can talk to me about those things. It's...
And you were telling me one of the other advantages of going downstairs and bringing your kids is that's how you met other parents here, and you started to form community with those other parents to reinforce and encourage one another. So tell me a little bit about those relationships.
From the moment they were infants, right up until now, where we have elementary school and middle school ages, we have just met a bunch of families where we used to get together and have play dates and, you know, just talk about the challenges of infants, which we thought were challenges, but our challenges are much bigger now. But just having that sense of community and having those other mothers to talk to, it was just very helpful as they were growing. And like I said, now I feel like I'm falling on those friendships even more to support them in the ways that they need that.
So at some point, you guys decided, okay, we're bringing our kids. Now your spiritual life is starting to get nourished, and you're starting to be challenged, and each of you decide to step up and kind of help us around here with different ministries. Don, you helped out with the kids ministry for a while, and Kyle, you stepped in to the tech ministry. Tell me a little bit about that decision. Let's ask you, Kyle, that decision to kind of transition and be part of the tech world. What motivated you to do that?
What or who?
Who? There's always a who.
So, and I was thinking about this last night. So, at a Global Leadership Summit series one summer, when Billy Petty, after I think his second year here, he challenged me. He had asked me, you know, about my business and technology and all that fun stuff. And so, well, you know much about cameras? Like, I know a little bit about cameras. Like, you know how to run them? Like, yeah, I can run a video camera. It's like, well, we need people in the tech arts department. So he got me in touch with Joe Summers, and you know, it's not that difficult to run a camera. It's difficult to operate the camera correctly for things such as this. Make sure the focus is on. Yeah. So that was how I got engaged.
So you weren't really proficient in camera work, but we took what we had and they trained you and you became part of a team.
Became part of a team, for a few years.
And Don, you helped us in the toddler ministry for a while.
Yes, I was in the midst of the children.
Yeah.
At home and here, and I loved it. But it doesn't matter. there are so many different ways to serve, and everyone has different talents. And so, it may take a little bit to kind of step
Find the
out.
match.
Yeah,
Find the
and
step out
find a
and find a
match.
match.
But, there's always something.
Now, recently, we just had a new members class, and I remember going to the new members class, and I went, Kyle and Don, you're here at the new members class. I somehow assumed you had been members all this time, but you guys decided to take the plunge. What was it that motivated you to say, yeah, we need to take this last step and actually join the church and become part? What was it that motivated you to do that?
I think it was the pie throwing.
The pie throwing?
That you
That
mentioned
was
earlier.
just too intriguing? Yeah.
After coming here for 15 years, it made sense for us to just become part of the family and to help others. And the people that have been around supporting and providing the different ministries, because it takes a lot of people to run a church. When you look at 3 different campuses, and from custodial, the parking, to people serving breakfast, greeters, there's a lot that goes into it, and it's the same people all the time. Same people all the time, every week. You see the same faces, and it's a great thing, but sometimes you really need to become
Roll up the
involved.
sleeves and get involved, yeah. Don, did you want to add to that?
I was just going to say that being a member was something that we had been wanting to do for years, but with the kids, it was just always such a busy time. So we decided that this was the time, because our kids are at an age where they're starting to try to figure out what their talents are and how they can, serve. They're wanting to take that leap themselves. So it was a good time for us, but more so for our family, because that is the direction that we want to guide them into.
So if you guys were going to talk to somebody that was trying to make up their mind about where to invest their time and energy, what would you tell them about the impact that those teachers and helpers downstairs have had on your children? What would you say to encourage that person to get involved in that ministry? What would you say to them about, maybe based on your experience with the workers down there?
I would just say, don't be afraid to step out of your comfort zone. There's always a need, whether it's in your church, whether it's in your community, whether it is in your neighborhood. The love that you put forth, you will receive in the end, and that it's heartwarming for me.
And there's a lot of support from the people that are working here, and people volunteered, and again, volunteer. So they certainly want to come around you and help you do the best job that you can, as far as whatever department that you're serving in. So,
Well, thank you very much, Kyle and Don, for sharing your story with us. How'd they do, guys? Your kids are applauding, so that means you win. So. Great, awesome. Well, this is one story, and then now let's watch a video of a few other faces and just quick testimonies of what the difference God is making in their lives through Bethany Ministries here. Let's watch the video. It's great to think that each one of those faces, that's a story in which God is working. And there are many more that we could share as well. So I want to talk to one more of my friends, and I want you to hear his story because it is so encouraging to all of us, and it is to me. I want you to meet my friend Tom. Welcome him.
Hi.
So Tom, why don't you tell your story a little bit? You came here a little over a year ago. Tell me about what brought you here to Bethany Church in the first place.
I was not particularly looking for Bethany, as you know. I was looking for a church. I'd gotten to the point in my life where I think you hit 70 years old and you start saying to yourself, what's it all about? And I grew up in a religious household, but then I went to religious school. But by the time I was in high school and in college, I had pretty much stopped. And then when I got married and our kids, and I always found a reason not to come to church. You know, we'd have a soccer game on Sunday or all the things that get in the way. And so I started saying to myself, I just wasn't fulfilled by all of that. And I started looking and wondering, and I thankfully had a very long-time friend and a business partner that stuck with me, and for 35 or 40 years kept saying to me, it's not about the church, Tom, it's about your personal relationship with God. And I don't know if you can imagine, but somebody telling you that for 35 or 40 years.
Finally sunk in, huh?
It took a while, but I came to understand what he was saying, and I started to just try to figure out what that meant. And so I came to Bethany a little over a year ago. It was the fall of 2018, and I remember walking in and being warmly greeted by a person at the front door, which was an unusual experience.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about, like, when you walked in, it wasn't maybe what you were used to as a church. It was your first time. You're like, I don't know what I'm getting into here. So tell me about what was it, that first impression as you walked in here? What kind of got your attention?
Well, it was not my experience. I was pretty good at hiding in the back of the church, and then just sort of getting out when it was over. And I walked in and this person greeted me, and you start to wonder, well, geez, it seemed like a genuine greeting. And then
they actually are happy you were here.
They were happy I was here. There was all this commotion in the lobby with people talking to each other and hugging each other and greeting each other, and all of the shoe boxes were sort of piled up, which I knew nothing about. But the activity level and the genuine nature of what was happening was what impressed me first. I came in and I listened for a couple of weeks, and I listened, and I got to know a number of people just to stop and talk to in the lobby. And as I said before, I spent 45 years in the insurance business. And so I always start with a disclaimer. And what I want you to know is there have been so many people that have helped me in large and small ways. And I am not going to use names. Number one, at 70 years old, you forget names. So that's one of the reasons. But the other is I don't want to leave anybody out. And my guess is there are many of you who I haven't met yet that will help me in the future. So I just want to say, as a congregation, it was so warm and welcoming that I can't sort of emphasize enough of that. It's really the congregation, the family that has built this church that attracted me to this church.
So you started coming to church and you started to hear some messages. And then at one point, you took a step out in faith. You came up to talk to me after one of the services.
Right.
That was, you took the initiative to talk. And tell us a little bit about that conversation.
Yes, I did. I can't remember exactly what the sermon was about. But
That happens all the time. Don't worry about it.
I just sort of had that feeling that I ought to do something. But again, the clock is sort of ticking for me, and I had no idea where to start. And so I came up and I asked you, I said, well, what do I do next? How do I find out more? And the thing that impressed me, or at least intellectually challenged me, was when you started talking about the Bible as a story. And I had always just thought of it as it was sort of a compilation. It was a book that was filled with analogies and metaphors, and I never got it as a story. And that really intrigued me. And so you handed me a brochure with all these different course offerings and support groups and ministries. And so I started to think about it. And I said, I really don't know much about any of this. And you said, well, the best place to start is the Essentials class. And the same week the Essentials class started and Revelation started. So I was coming to both.
Yeah.
And
so the shallow end of the pool and the deep end of the pool. You jumped in both places.
Both places.
Yeah.
And the Essentials class, the piece that I knew, to me, when I thought of the cross, I thought of, just where Jesus hung. And as you started teaching me about the cross, I realized the symbolism was so much deeper, but more meaningful. And it actually meant something. And there were many things like that. I think we studied how to pray. What's a prayer?
Yeah.
And to me, a prayer was always a very rote. I had memorized a grouping of words, and that was a prayer. And through study, that wasn't a prayer at all. And I learned, and I'm still learning. I don't want to say I learned. I am learning to try to have a conversation with Christ. And again, these things, probably to all of you that do this, are normal to your part of belief. But to mine, it's very different, and it became meaningful.
So one of the conversations we had to have is you were feeling kind of a heaviness because, kind of figuring this out late in life in the 70s, like, well, now there's the Bible, there's a Christ. And so part of that cross conversation is about the forgiveness aspect. And there was a turning point there in your life when you kind of figured out what that had to do and give you a new lease on life, so to speak.
It again, the same with age, you start thinking things are over.
Yeah.
And I can remember you told me that God will forgive if you come to him humbly and honestly and with a pure heart. And I said, at my age, and it was like, yes.
Yeah.
That's you go from that point forward, not backwards.
Yeah, you start where you are.
You start where you are, and that's and I, again, to some of you, that's going to be sort of a mind-blowing thought process. I thought about, or I didn't, you thought about Paul, and I started reading about Paul, and then I know, and I'm not supposed to say this, but I realized if God could forgive Paul, he certainly could forgive me. And then
Paul, who used to kill Christians.
Right. And so I haven't done any of that yet.
Yeah.
And so it was sort of like, wow, I can have a fresh start. And now what do I want to do with that time? And that's sort of where it's like the what do I want to do? I knew I couldn't just come eat Sunday. That wasn't where I was. I wanted to actually become engaged. And so I met with Pastor Bruce at Me and Ollie's in Exeter. And through the course of that conversation, he told me about Stephen's ministries. Yeah. And literally, I would say within 2 days, Drew called me and told me more, did a little interview on the phone, and then met me. And about I within a day, he had an application.
We're very efficient when it comes to enlisting help around here.
Yeah, well, it was I think training started. In fact, I couldn't do the training. I said, Drew, I work on weekends. I can't do the training. And all he said was, well, God will figure it out. And sure enough, that weekend I was in training.
Yeah.
And for those that don't know what Stephen's ministry is, it was a turning point for me. Just some incredible people from this church run Stephen's Ministries, and they train, and it does involve a reasonable amount of training. But one of the first things that they said to me was that my role as a Stephen's minister is to be the caregiver, and emphasis on care, but it's God's role to be the cure giver. And I thought about that, and I felt much better because I don't have a biblical background, and I didn't know how in the world can I religiously be there, because that wasn't my strength. And they've made it perfectly clear that that's God's role. He'll do the curing, you do the caring. And through the entire class, we had a wonderful group of people that we all grew very close as a group, but everybody contributed to each other in sort of helping us develop the skills that were going to be necessary. And it just became something that this church has a number of those sorts of ministry opportunities for people to get involved with. It's whatever you want to do. And I realized that this was a first step, a small first step for me.
Yeah, it's great. Now, part of, you're also showing up to a lot of Bible studies. And I tell you, it's great when folks get engaged, but I get Tom is exceptional here, because I see you like with this thirst to know the Word, and it's like every time you're coming to go deeper and deeper, and that's not entirely usual, but obviously God has got hold of you with His story. So tell me a little bit about this love affair with Scripture that you're engaging in, and why that has just captured your imagination and your heart.
Well, as I've said, my tradition, I didn't learn the Bible well. And so I didn't have any of that background. The concept of the Bible being a story, both historically accurate and just is entirely new to me. And as you and I had talked, the Bible, and I think more in terms of athletically, and I recognize that the Bible is life's game plan. Anything that you can run into, you can open up the Bible and find an answer to. And that end is just phenomenal to me. It's just like, gee, somebody gave me a playbook. Here it is. Here's the playbook. All you got to do is study it, and you're going to know what you need to do. I never had any of that before. I never felt that way. And for some reason, when I did read the Bible as a much younger person, I didn't get any of that out of it. I was reading it in a whole different way. Once I started to read it as what's the lesson that somebody's trying to teach me here, I looked at it and sort of said to myself, oh boy, what's next? I read the notes now. I read all the notes.
You get your study Bible and you're like reading the notes?
I read all the notes because I want the background. I want to understand the story and then try to understand the lesson that's being given to me. And it's all there. And I still find that phenomenal. It's been there for over 70 years for me, and I haven't bothered to look at it.
Now you're making up for lost time there.
Making up for lost time. And as I said, I hear the TikTok every day. And it's like, I way back when I was a kid, I can remember I was part of a youth group that used to do a lot of camping. And the instruction was always, leave the place better than what you found it. And that's what I'm feeling about life right now.
Yeah.
How am I going to leave this place better than I found it? How am I going to impart this to my kids and my grandkids? And that's right now what my mission is.
And that's the last hurdle, right? We talked about when you first came here, that whole idea of be one, make one. You were like, I don't know about that. That's a little much for me to think about making disciples.
Yes,
But
yes.
you've kind of learned that it's not the scary thing that you once thought it was. So tell us a little bit about how you've kind of made that mental
Well, I
journey.
had an impression. I guess that would be I had an impression of making a disciple as a television evangelist kind of a thing, and I had to go up to everybody on the street and sort of evangelized, and that isn't at all what I've learned, or even what I'm comfortable with now. At first, I guess the fact that I didn't know a lot, I was very uncomfortable. And in fact, even in the early classes, I had a difficult time expressing because I just felt I was so far behind the curve. And now it's sort of, I find that I get into conversations not about evangelizing, just about things in life. I had an incredible conversation with my granddaughter. I've got a 13-year-old granddaughter that's going through all the things that a teenage girl goes through. And she asked me a question, and she and I had a conversation about God that first I would have never even thought she had ever thought about it.
And she asked that question when she came to your Stephen ministry.
She did.
So they came. So your kids came, your grandkids came to see you join the church and
Yes.
become a Stephen minister. And that prompted a question.
That it
she now
prompted
asked.
a question, and she's now going to come back with me, by the way. And I love the thought that my kids, who I did not raise in any kind of a tradition, are seeing a difference in their father.
Yeah.
And we're very willing. One flew up from Dallas, and they're seeing a difference in me, and they don't know what it's all about, but they are encouraged to help and support me.
And that's God's sovereignty in all of it. I know you're concerned that it was late in life.
Yes.
But God's using that very fact to say, hey, wait a minute, there's a difference in dad, there's a difference in grandpa.
Right.
Let's have that conversation. So it's all
Exactly.
in God's sovereign work that
Exactly.
he's using you now to, and whether you like it or not, you're making disciples.
Well,
having these
that's the
conversations.
way it's comfortable.
Yeah.
Right now, it's comfortable to have. I have somebody at work. I talk quite a bit about it with him. I've got a very good friend that's going through a really severe illness and has talked to me about suicide as his way out. And lo and behold, I've known this guy for years, and he's never mentioned God, and all of a sudden he's praying.
Yeah.
And it's
God is
just,
using you in that situation. So.
it just is comfortable. It's comfortable to talk to him about this.
Well, thank you, Tom, for being so transparent and be willing to share your story with us. I know you've been an encouragement to a great many folks here. Just that idea to start where you are, and God can begin to use you right where you are. And thank you so much for that word of encouragement. All right, isn't it great to meet him? Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Now we're going to listen to a song. The praise teams a while back kind of came together, and this idea of whatever's in heaven, may it come to earth. God's doing this healing work here as it is in heaven. Can we just let God's work continue to work among us? Let's worship together as we hear this song.
Spirit of the Lord is here.
Let me just close with a verse of scripture. It's Paul's words from Ephesians chapter 4, beginning in verse 11. He says, "So Christ himself gave the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the pastors and teachers to equip his people for works of service, so that the body of Christ may be built up, until we all reach unity in the faith and in the knowledge of the Son of God, and become mature, attaining to the whole measure of the fullness of Christ." What you witnessed today was this in reality, this in the flesh. Christ is building his church through the gifts of service that you folks bring. Your time, your talent, and treasure. So the next steps is really quite simple. First of all, if you're out there serving, let me encourage you. Did you notice how all these folks, all different ministries, divorce care, greeters, services from the heart, children's ministry, student ministry, everybody connects at a different place. So wherever you're serving, it's important. And sometimes it was 2, 3, 4, 5 touches before someone really got engaged. So whatever you're doing, whether it's behind the scenes or in front of the cameras or up front, just keep doing it, because you never know how God is weaving together this tapestry, this story. Keep doing what you're doing. And for those of you that's maybe on the other side saying, wow, how do I do that? How do I get engaged? You notice how they each took that one other little step. You know, they got the emails, they got the pastors begging them, but they took that other step to just talk to somebody, to reach out, to walk across the line. And once they made that decision to get engaged in this service and ministry and connection with other people, God began to build and influence their lives. So those are the 2 steps. Keep doing what you're doing, and maybe that you just need that little nudge to just walk across the line and say, yes, I want to become a part of a bigger thing. And God will begin to do just this, begin to build us all together in the full measure of Christ. Again, let me remind you, if you came here with a heavy burden on your heart, please feel free to come up. I'll be here to pray with you. Other people will be here to pray with you. But we all go knowing God is good, and all the time. The Lord bless you. Thank you for coming.